opposite views and present a Mongol world government that does not believe in our Constitution. The avowed purpose of the United Nations was to bring peace to the world. It had a great appeal to all classes because in this country, the people do not want war. But time has revealed the fact that the United Nations is more concerned with changing the Constitution of the United States than it is with world peace. We would need no organization of this character to obtain peace if it were not for Russia. Russia and her satellites are the only ones indulging in aggression. Yet Russia is a member of the organization which professes peace, but is actually spreading war. Russia holds a powerful position in the United Nations, for the military head of that organization has always been a Russian citizen. The military head of that organization has always been a Russian citizen. The military head of the United Nations has always been a Russian citizen and always will be. For a secret agreement made in London between Molotov and Alger Hiss provides that the Russians should hold that office permanently. Did you hear what I said, ladies and gentlemen? This is out of the mouth of a congressman who knows. Russia is recognized by this country and maintains a cesspool of communists right here in this great capital city. She can speak her ism with impunity. She gets all the privileges of the United Nations, yet her daily action is absolutely against what the United Nations was avowedly organized for. Under the United Nations and under the recognition of our government, Russia has a powerful position of advantage from which to carry on her Cold War and cause us to expend ourselves until we are resourceless. That is the doctrine put forward by Karl Marx, and the Russians follow that course not only gladly, but thoroughly and consistently. Russia's only hope to overrun the United States is to do it by intrigue and the spread of communism among our own people. And through our recognition of her and her position in the United Nations, this process is going forward to the everlasting satisfaction of the Soviets. Joseph McCarthy, ladies and gentlemen, was absolutely right. He just didn't know what to call them. You can call them communists if you want. You can call them socialists if you want. But it all comes right out of the secret societies that are responsible for these political viewpoints. And they spawn more socialists and more communists. Our country today is in the hands of international socialism and communists. It's being run by members of all of these secret societies. And all you got to do is pick up a copy of Who's Who in America, a copy of the congressional biographical statements, and just go down the list of names, and you'll see it's all there. Ladies and gentlemen, how long will it take the American people to rise up in their might and demand our withdrawal from this communistic enterprise? I do not know. But they're becoming more enlightened as the days pass. He said that in 1954. I think they became dumber, more ignorant, more stupid, more apathetic, and more irresponsible since 1954. And his closing paragraph, our only fear for the security of the future is the fear that our own people will fall victims to this Russian world propaganda. Well, you don't believe that the head of the military in the United Nations is a Russian and has always been a Russian and always been and always will be a Russian, as the congressman said? Who knows? And in case you don't believe him or me, I can read to you from Treaties biography, or autobiography, I should say, Treaties autobiography in the cause of peace. 7 years with the United Nations, and he was the Secretary General. He was the Secretary General of the United Nations. His name is Treaties. The name of his book, In the Cause of Peace, 7 years with the United Nations, published by the Macmillan Company, New York, 1954, if you'd like to get a copy. And I'm going to go directly to page 45. I'm going to read to you from the second paragraph on. Mr. Wyszynski did not delay his approach. He was the first to inform me of an understanding which the Big Five had reached in London on the appointment of a Soviet national as Assistant Secretary General for Political and Security Council Affairs. Mr. Vinshinsky simply spoke of an agreement. He said nothing of its binding quality, of the right of the Big Five to arrive at it, or of the length of time it was meant to apply. Now, by the terms of the Charter, the Secretary General has full authority in the disposition of the Assistant Secretary Generalships with respect both to their nationality and to their personality. The authority, in fact, was the point of a hard-won decision at San Francisco, which rejected an attempt to prescribe that there should be 4 Deputy Secretaries General appointed by the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. In the same manner as the Secretary General, strictly speaking, therefore, the Big Five had no right to arrive at any understanding regarding the distribution of the offices of Assistant Secretary General, which was binding upon the Secretary General. This is not to say, however, that it would have been politic of me to resist the great power accord. Moreover, I welcomed the understanding as a sign of goodwill and confidence between East and West that the Soviet Union wanted one of its nationals to fulfill the premier assistant secretaryship could be taken as another indication of serious Soviet interest in the United Nations, and that the United States was willing to agree to accord this key post to a national of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was evidence of an American desire to encourage this interest for the sake of world peace. Every single person occupying that position, which is the military head of all United Nations forces, is the man into whose hands all the intelligence of the United Nations is delivered, has always been a member of the USSR, is now a Russian, and will always be, ladies and gentlemen, because that is what was agreed to. You heard it from me, you heard it from the congressman, and you heard it from the Secretary General of the United Nations. So don't call from there and tell us that we're full of baloney, because we're not. I read you now from the congressional record of the House of Representatives, January 15th, 1962. None is so blind as he who will not see. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks. The Speaker, is there any objection to the request of the gentleman from California? There was no objection. Mr. Speaker, on the opening day of the second session of the 87th Congress, I introduced House Resolution 9567, a bill to rescind and revoke membership of the United States and the United Nations and the specialized agencies thereof, and to repeal the Immunities Act relative thereto. I introduced this resolution because it is my firm conviction that this nation cannot survive as a republic as long as we are shackled to an international organization by a treaty which supersedes our Constitution. He admits right there, they all know, they've always known, and I'm going to read this paragraph again for you. I introduced this resolution because it is my firm conviction that this nation cannot survive as a republic as long as we are shackled to an international organization by a treaty which supersedes our Constitution. Period. How about that? And down further, let's skip a couple of paragraphs here. To prove my point, I submit the following facts for candid review. Our Constitution provides, this Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made, under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. Hence, any law enacted by Congress pursuant to a treaty becomes the supreme law of the land, even though it would otherwise be unconstitutional. The supremacy of laws under a treaty was clearly set forth in the decision of the United States Supreme Court in 1920 in the Missouri versus Holland case, wherein a federal law, otherwise unconstitutional, was held valid because of a treaty between Canada and the United States. This decision clearly held that where there was a conflict between the provisions of our Constitution and the provisions of a treaty, this conflict must be resolved in favor of the treaty. You can get a record of the Supreme Court decisions, and you can read it for yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a copy. This same doctrine has been extended to include executive agreements. The result of this situation has been to destroy our limited form of Republican government and has denied to each state a Republican form of government as guaranteed by the Constitution and has supplanted it with a government of unlimited powers which destroys the historical separation of executive, judicial, and legislative branches of our government. This was certainly never envisioned by the framers of the Constitution. So here you find that according to the rulings of the Supreme Court, any treaty, when in conflict with the Constitution, the conflict must be resolved in favor of the treaty. And this applies also to executive agreements, ladies and gentlemen.